it's back. Well, we are back on the Phoenix, or the Magpie, whichever you want to call it. I kind of lost a little bit of drive with this one, and then got distracted by the great guitar build-off. Yggdrasil is now finished, so I need to get back and finish this one. Since it's the 2020 build, and I'm already on... this is video number 19. I think I'm going to aim to have this played by the end of video 20. I mean, ideally it'd be getting played halfway through video 20, but we'll see. So whilst this has been sat around, we've had one or two issues with humidity in my house. Some of the silver inlay kind of expanded as the temperature rose, and we had a couple of tiny areas that popped out because they weren't solidly attached. So I've gone back round and touched up, re-glued, and made sure that it's all refinished around the edge. I've then continued to finish the top and the back. I've done plenty of wet sanding, plenty of oiling. We've got a nice shine to this now. I think all it needs is a bit of Renaissance wax to give it slightly more satin sheen. Or I might just buff that up to a high gloss, I haven't decided yet. And that's where we're at. But the biggest issue we had with humidity and temperature was the tremolo cover for the cavity at the back, which hasn't been oiled yet, but I don't think that would have made any difference because the grain orientation of the veneers and everything, and the piece of Zebrano that I've used, has decided it didn't like being in the shape that it was. It's no longer very flat, which means it's no longer any use. So I think I'm going to have to remake this, and to stop it happening again, I think I'm going to change the design slightly. I'm going to make that from aluminium, and I'm going to transfer this shape onto here, and I'm going to work with that and see what I can do. I think. So I've cut this down and I've drilled the hole, and it's now a perfect fit. But it's just a big slab of aluminium, which looks a little bit plain and boring. So what I've also done is take the original cover, and I've taken about 5mm off the edges all the way around and extended the hole in the middle. So if I overlay that, we get a nice kind of aluminium border with a Zebrano centre. I think I'm going to attempt being the operative word, I may have to start over on this and redo it all over again. but we'll see. I'm going to attempt to inlay this into the aluminium. I have no idea how I'm going to do that. I think I've figured out how I'm going to do this. I have got a little router base for a Dremel type tool. I've got my spinning blade of death. That is its technical term. I've extended the base of this to be able to lift it slightly higher because these are quite long. And I'm going to see how that does. I think I'm cutting about 0.5 millimetre at the moment, which may be too much. I may have to do it in about 10 passes, I don't know. But I've attached the aluminium down and I'm just going to give it a try and see what happens. If it all goes wrong, it's going to go spectacularly wrong, so you get to see that. And yeah, let's give it a bash. Definitely going to want safety goggles for this one. Plan A was rubbish, so I'm going for Plan B. I've recessed the aluminium cavity cover into this plate of MDF, so it's now sat flush with the top of this. Then I've made a template which sits about 5 millimeters inside the edge of the aluminium, which runs all the way around. I've screwed that down, so this is going nowhere. I've also put a little circle, which was the most awkward bit to make, to be honest. I've attached that down where the hole needs to be, so that'll block off and give me a little ring of aluminium in the whole area there. And then I'm going to get a router, because it's got slightly more power and it's got a bigger bit and it's a bit more stable. But I don't think it's going to be that one. I think I need a bigger router. I think I need this one. So that is now a piece of Zebrano and some magnets inlaid into the aluminium. Once the epoxy is dry, I'll flip that over and I'll give it a really good sand and polish, and there will probably be a gap around the edge of the Zebrano, so I think I'm probably going to take a gouge of some sort and just clean that up and then maybe inlay something. Maybe ebony dust and super glue. That might work. Just pick out the edge a little bit, tidy it up. And then, that's the control plate. Control plate? Tremolo cavity cover. That's the one. Remade and sorted. And all I've got to say now is try and warp now, you little b****. So I need to figure out how to wire this up now. But before I can do that, I need to check the clearance with the tremolo springs, which means I need to start installing some of the trem system. To do that means I need to also install the tuners. So we're going to do a partial assembly and then probably a bit of a disassembly and then reassemble. and then I have to figure out how to mount the battery, which I still haven't figured out, but we'll get there. So I'm going to get some parts out. So first we've got the tuners, which I custom ordered a set of Schala Da Vinci tuners, which have got a nice little clear window in the back so you can see the workings. We've got ebony buttons, and because there's a trem, we've also got locking thumb screws on the top, which follow nicely with my black and chrome theme that I'm going for on this guitar. In the headstock, I've already installed some metal tube as little bushings for the stud on the tuners, so I'm just going to start putting these in, and they will look really cool. Stunning. And to go with the slightly over-the-top, over-engineered theme, the trem claw that I'm using isn't your standard bent piece of steel. I've never been a big fan of them kind of hanging off the end of a couple of screws, and they're a bit fiddly to adjust, especially when you block the tremolo to stop it from swinging around. Schala, again, do the shore claw, which is this. Basically a massively over-engineered trem claw. So you may well have seen a VegaTrem before. Ziggy's excited by this prospect, but I can assure you, you haven't seen one like this before. I custom ordered this, so we have a mixture of black and chrome to match with the Magpie theme. We've got a black arm with chrome collar, a chrome base plate with black saddles, and they've actually sent me a mixture, the option to have the grub screws as either steel or the black steel versions. I think I'm going to stick with steel because I like the way they look and it complements the black plate and the chrome pole pieces on the pickups, which obviously aren't in yet. But I think this looks absolutely fantastic, and I have to say the guys over at VegaTrem were absolutely brilliant to deal with. Plus, I can say that I've got a completely unique custom VegaTrem. Until somebody looks at this and decides that it looks really cool and they want the same thing. So don't do that. Although whatever happens, this was the first. I was going to get the 2-screw version, but to be honest, the 4-screw version was slightly quicker on delivery because I think they just had them in, and I don't mind. It doesn't make any real difference to me because it's not retrofitting it, it's installing this for the first time, and I quite like the 4 screws. It just gives me a little bit extra strength and stability, so there's going to be less chance of bridge creep, which obviously I don't want in this because it'd be a right pain in the arse to fix it. So the first thing to do is use the holes that I drilled previously and fasten the block down. That has a huge range of movement. That can go full dive bomb and almost as far the other way. Bloody insane. They actually even gave me black screws to attach the block down, which I'm not going to use, but I like very much. The attention to detail from these guys is, it makes me happy. So, the springs that they give you a range which I believe are to correspond with the gauge of strings you use. So, what do we have? High tension is for 11s and above, medium tension for 10s, low tension is 9s, extra low tension is 8s. What happens if you're Billy Gibbons? You have to just use one medium tension spring. Now I string everything up with Ernie Ball Super Slinkies because I like them, but also because they're a very light gauge string. Very few people are going to go for a lighter gauge. Some people might go for a heavier gauge. You can take more material away from the nut, you can lift the action and add more relief comfortably for a heavier gauge string. It's a bit more difficult to go from a heavier gauge to a lighter gauge. So I set up for the lightest gauge I can get comfortably and leave it to tweak after that. So I believe I'm going to be using the low tension screws, which means that those can go in as spares. All this paperwork will be going in the case with this guitar when it's done, because if I sell it, which I probably will, somebody's going to want to know this information. It's a very satisfying fit. And then the collar just tightens it up nicely. You can either have it swinging nice and loose, or you can nip it up and it'll hold exactly where you want. How's that for custom? So to install the block with the springs is a little bit different to most tremolos. What you have to do is loosen off these little grub screws, install your spring, and then retighten the grub screw. That just helps hold the spring in place, stops it escaping, which is nice. And then the springs just feed nicely through the hole into the cavity at the back. However, this is where it gets fiddly. So as I thought, the difficulty with this tremolo and this body is that this body is extra deep. VegaTrem don't yet do an extra deep block. So what I need to do is flip this over and just cut away some little channels in the sides of this cavity so that the springs can move freely, because at full height they just catch the edge of here. I can use these grub screws and actually lift the springs up in the block, but I don't really want to do that. The more hard and firm they are against the block, the more solid the attachment, the more stable things are going to be. Well, the tremolo cavity cover is now dried, sanded, and fits beautifully. I really like it. It's still held on with magnets. Obviously there's a little bit more weight to it now with the aluminium, and the magnets are a little bit further away from the other magnets in the body, so it may require a couple of screws later on, but we'll see. One issue I've found is that this hole is actually going to be filled up, and so there won't be anywhere to lift it and remove it. So I need to find a way to easily remove this cover. What I'm thinking is, if I dig a little recess down in, say, this corner with a straight line about ½ an inch back from the corner, if I push on that, it will pivot and pop up, and I can get a fingernail or a guitar pick or something under this edge here and just lift it out. So I think we'll get some chisels. I think that works. So I need to attach the circuit board and the battery in place. They're going to sit in this cavity, which is going to be a little bit cramped when I'm finished. So to make life a little bit easier, I'm going to attach these to the cover plate. So when you take the cover off, these will come away and give you a bit more space. And then underneath that, I'm going to have to figure out how to sort out all my wiring. I'll be able to run this wire to probably a small circuit board that I'll make to go in the middle here to connect all the wires to one central source. And I think that should work. So first things first, this sits quite comfortably in here, and if I line up the charging port with the hole in my cover, preferably without getting wires trapped, it should sit quite comfortably there as well. All I need to do is centralise that in the hole and stick it in place. I love making things sound a lot easier than they really are. Well, I've got the battery and circuit installed in the back plate now. I've used a hot glue gun to just attach the wires down so they're nice and tidy, keep everything neat, because I like things neat. And what I need to do now is find a way to connect all of these wires in the back of the guitar to the right place. So we've got 3 live and 3 ground. So I need them all to connect to these, which is going to have 1 live and 1 ground. And then 1 wire which connects to the jack, which is going to be a stereo jack, so that it switches and turns the lights on when I plug it in. So I've driven to a friend's house who is a bit of an electronics whiz, and I've stolen some of this. This is basically strip board. It's got strips of copper with small holes for making little circuits. I need to have a figure out and a bit of a measure and a play and find out what I need from this to make a little circuit board that connects everything up and allows me to connect this wire to this circuit board to power everything there, and be able to have this just in the cavity to plug into the back plate and provide power. Well, that took a while. I've been faffing around with the wiring now for about 3.5 hours. I was having a few issues. I created the little circuit board to start with, and the fretboard lit up beautifully, but the body didn't. So I double checked all my connections, everything was fine. I disconnected the fretboard and the body lit up. So I went and looked at the battery to see if it was fully charged and plugged it in and left it to charge fully. Whilst I was doing that, I tidied up the circuit board that I'd made and remade it basically, because I didn't like it. It was too small and too fiddly. I extended some of the wires and I generally kind of neatened things up, and then I soldered everything back in place. So we've got the two power wires, the ground and the switched ground, coming from the circuit board into the main part of the body. They are currently sticking out through the pickup cavity, which this black one is my ground wire, this one is my switched ground. This will go to the stereo jack, this will go to the back of one of the pots. Because I've got that ground there, I also thought I'd best ground the strings, so I've added a coiled little bit of wire to the ground strip, which is then added to the trem claw. All of my ground connections are up one side, all of my live connections up another side, and then I've got a strip up the middle which is for my switched side. And when I tried it, it still didn't work. So I thought maybe the resistance and the way that the electrickery is moving around is not working quite as planned, because I think it's the way I've built it is a much lower resistance for the neck LEDs than for the strips in the body. So I thought, let's try a resistor in line with the neck. So I did that, and now we need to test it. So we plug in the power, put on the back plate, and to see if it works, we join these two wires together. Oh yes. I think we need to do that properly. With no lights. There we go.